drops in. Cool. Well, thanks for joining, Rowan. I'm excited to see some of what you're up to. Show it off with everyone. Yeah, so Rowan's game to give us a demo of some of the work that he's been doing with Steve and others at iooxa. But also, maybe if you have some notes or things you want to be sure we get to, please just drop them in the notes here, and we'll make sure that we've got enough time at the end to cover any sort of important items or burning comments and things like that. Yeah, cool. Rowan, do you want to take it away? Do you know everyone here, by the way? I think you know most people. I don't know if you know John.
I don't. I've watched YouTube SimPEG things, so I feel like I might have at least seen you there. So
yeah. I'm John.
Hi, John.
Hey, Rowan.
Yeah, I don't have like a presentation, but I can show you some stuff at least. Well, show you your guys' stuff basically back to you. So I guess I'm starting up a new company called iooxa, which is sort of like aimed at trying to bridge the gaps between programming and writing. And I think all of us have sort of written theses or papers or those sorts of things, but like one of the interesting sort of works that I think is really driving my thinking is the GeoSci textbook resource thing, which is like, and I guess the reasons that I think this is kind of cool are it's like a collaborative work that integrates computational as well as sort of prose and writing and equations and all of those sorts of things, which is like, and like if I like look out to the future of how I would like academia and education to work, these are the sort of resources that I'd like to see a lot more of in the world, where you have like embedded code that like that it runs, you can jump into that, you can see the source code, you can dive deeper, as well as you can contribute back. So right now there's this edit on GitHub link, which means that you need to know RST, GitHub, Git, merge requests, pull requests, all sorts of stuff to actually contribute back. And so one of the goals that I'm trying to do with iooxa is make the barrier to entry to contribute these sort of interactive resources make that a lot lower. Does that sort of make sense? Or any thoughts or feelings? So there's a couple things that iooxa has. So sort of you can sign up for like an alpha that we're doing right now. So you get like a profile page which has like whatever all of your projects, which are sort of similar to GitHub repositories. So I made a SimPEG one somewhere in here that doesn't have anything in it right now, but I have shared this with Lindsay. So I can create a new article and then start writing in here. And so this is just sort of an editing environment that just is text and some other things like math and that sort of stuff. And so you can put images in here, you can have all of your text-based stuff. If someone else logs in, this is a collaborative editor, aiming to be sort of similar to Google Docs with comments. And I guess the main difference on this side of things is that each one of these, sort of similar to GitHub, is versioned, or sorry, to Jupyter. Is sort of a block of content, which I can then look at the versions over time. And that allows you, like, especially thinking about these much larger resources, to compose those and import things and sort of work together on small bits of things, if that sort of makes sense. Any questions or thoughts on this side, or?
So are you looking for this to be like a replacement of Jupyter notebooks, or where is this fitting in the scheme of things?
No, so definitely not a replacement for Jupyter notebooks. So this is focused mostly on writing, rather than Jupyter is primarily focused on the programming side of things, although they do have the like markdown cells. So this adds like the what you see is what you get editor, so you can actually just like click on things and edit them directly. And so I think it's hopefully like a little bit less of a barrier to entry to people who don't know Markdown, don't know Git, don't know a console, can't open up a Jupyter notebook, for example.
Okay.
Cool. So, and then I guess like one of the other things is that we actually want, like similar to this sort of resource, we want to be able to like make the text as easy to edit as possible. So like having like basically this side of things just being super easy to edit. And then we also want to sort of intersperse computational content in there. And so what we've been working on is actually a Jupyter extension to do that. So if now I'm over in Jupyter land, actually, and the only thing that's different here is I've installed a Chrome extension that does a few things inside of the notebook and adds this tab over here, which I can open up, and it has a couple things that it knows about here. Does that sort of make sense? And so inside of here, I can either work at the notebook level or actually the cell level. And so similar to over in the iooxa land, I can actually save this cell to that project. So I can save that. What happens when I do that is it's now actually tracking the versions of that. And it's over in iooxa land. So if I open it up in iooxa and send this over to Lindsay, she can actually jump in and start editing that notebook right away if she's following along. So I showed you that this SimPEG project was edited with her, and so now she's actually jumping in there and collaboratively editing this over in iooxa, and so we can like maybe fix some of this math up, other things, I don't know, and then actually save a new version of this. And because this cell was linked, I don't know, maybe Lindsay, do you want to throw a comment on there as well? I hear her typing.
Yes.
Comment. Awesome. So this is now like a linked cell that's sort of managed by iooxa that also allows you to jump to and see the changes, so that if you're working with someone who's not in like is maybe like wants to contribute to the writing side of a Jupyter notebook, but not necessarily jump in and change the code, or if you're like versioning code cells between notebooks, that's sort of allows you to pull those changes in, and now that math and sort of all of the text is updated right away.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I don't know. So I guess like the other like so some of the stuff that we were trying in the EM GeoSci world was these as sort of equation banks, which is something that was like a little bit difficult to do because you can't, like releasing a new version of the equation was wrapped up in the entire repository, and you couldn't really have a comment on that equation specifically, or like, I don't know, it was just like the overhead to do it is always hard. And so this side of things allows you to actually possibly work more in that way, if that makes sense. So like reusing equations, figures, linking those directly to yeah, your Jupyter notebooks as well.
Okay, so we see a segment of EMGSI, and I don't want to use GitHub, but I want to add some text or do something to that. Then can you walk me through like what the procedure would then be, and then
So
how? Pardon me.
Yeah, keep on going.
Yeah, so I think maybe you kind of showed it, but eventually it gets back into the same document that that it started in. But you have taken that, somehow worked it in iooxa with that, made some changes, and then you have pushed it back to the initial document and then changed that. Is that what you just did?
So this isn't hooked up to the GeoSci at all right now. So I was just sort of using some of these example notebooks to demonstrate that sort of work. And so this is sort of like facilitating that out of band collaboration loop. So say Lindsay like sent you a notebook. This is a different way for you to get your comments in, and then maybe Lindsay would help with the merging and deploying over to GeoSci for right now.
Okay.
So as we sort of like go into the future, I want to be able to sort of like save this version on iooxa.com and actually be able to publish it directly from here, and that way these sort of actions and the editing is like right in line for people who are viewing the article.
So you would have an HTML output basically, or are you planning on hosting it directly on your site?
Yeah,
are you a website hosting company, or are you an editing company?
Basically. I think like anyone who exists on the web like turns into that. So yeah, so this would be able to be published on like iooxa.com or maybe subdomains like similar to Read the Docs. Is that Read the Docs hosts GeoSci at the moment, I believe. And so if iooxa was able to do that, then you could have these sort of like very granularly referenced versionable assets, I guess, or these blocks that you can copy links to. You can open that as its own page and sort of see where it's used throughout the resource. Thinking about like forking that, being able to be used in other people's resources as well.
Rowan, do you want to show the idea? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sagi.
No, nothing.
I was just going to say, do you want to actually walk us through like an example, kind of thinking through the equation bank idea is like have an equation that we then use elsewhere, and I'll save you a new version.
Is this you writing this?
Yeah. It should be.
I don't know. Oh, it's phi, bar phi. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Although my render isn't being nice at all. I'll have to look at that. Okay, yeah, sure. So
okay.
if we save this guy, does that sort of make sense? I don't know why the deltas aren't showing up. Are they showing on yours?
They are showing on mine, but you could just change it and do here, let's just do AX equals B.
You're on it. Sweet. Cool. Awesome. So this is like an equation that Lindsay has written there, and this has like its previous versions that I can actually scroll backwards in time and look at. And so one of the things that I can do here is I can copy this link, and this is like sort of like our version of a DOI, is that it's exactly always to that version specifically, and it just shows you that thing. And so if I go over here and create a new article, something with an equation, so I can write here, but I could also import that block. And so that's importing that directly. So I'm pulling that piece directly from a different article into this article. And so I can write around it. I can actually like fix other things in it. I don't know if it's C or something. Merge that draft. And my previous article didn't change, but it does have access to these future versions in front of it.
Can you pull that in Jupyter Notebook or Jupyter Lab?
Yep. So if we copy this link, I can go over to skip above Markdown. I can go over here, click the cell, paste that in, import it. That's a little awkward, but it should work. This is not doing the Markdown. It's actually something that I haven't done before. But yes, that's totally the idea, so that you can actually have some cells in your Jupyter Notebook, some cells in other places that just like allow you to sort of like interweave content between various notebooks, articles, presentations, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think this kind of opens up the door of like editing some of the context in our like notebooks or apps, because we have some introduction of the apps. But I mean, I think that's a rough, sometimes like it's not perfect writing and people may want to change, but we don't have a pretty good mechanism to change that. But this would be a kind of nice tool to do that. But Rowan, I just had a chat with Rosemary. It's not really directly related to this, but one thing that she didn't like, not about the iooxa, but the idea of white paper. So sometimes like they just produce some scientific result without the peer review, and then they figure, oh, that was wrong. And she kind of hated that. So I thought like there's somewhere in between blog and the peer-reviewed article, where like if you have some functions that you can revisit and peer-reviewed by other people and have some functionality to edit and at least make some sort of suggestion, I think there are places this can play a huge role. I just a thought, like, when I was just listening to her, this could be an interesting tool to be used, because I'm just thinking about, oh, what is the real difference of Medium blog? But that Medium blog is sort of on the fly, so people write things and very fast. It's actually nice to have that fast mechanism, but you're not going to go backwards in that Medium blog, and that's probably not designed to be. But I think there are some materials that people want to revisit and maybe update, and that's probably a good place to be used. Just a thought.
Yeah, totally.
Right, or you write a white paper and just let it be on the internet for a while. If people are interested, they comment on it, and then eventually ends up in a journal. You know, if you get enough comments.
But what's actually the downside of that white paper idea? I think let's say Stanford University, like big name university, writes something about that, and then some people figure, oh, that's not right, and that makes a huge problem. So like that's where kind of why she didn't like it, because there's no going backwards and way to fix it. But working in the peer-reviewed journal, it's just too slow. So you need somewhere in between.
Will it be possible to pull, let's say iooxa hosts a library of text or a library of equations or whatnot? Would it be possible to do, if we're, let's say I'm on my desktop, I have my notebook open, to do a pull, to have like some sort of API to be able to pull stuff up?
Yep. Actually, like each one of these like blocks has an open and API side of things, which gives you like the pointer to exactly where the API is, and it has a bunch of links down here that you can click on to sort of navigate through that.
So I could embed that snippet as Markdown, and then it would display what's recorded on iooxa.
So if you go to this like download link, the default is HTML, and if I say format equals MD, then it actually sends it back to you in Markdown. Is that sort of what you were?
No, let's say we're talking about versioning equations, right? So you version one ax equal b, and I would like to be able to display x equal b in my notebook. Only this.
Okay. Yeah, this piece was supposed to be doing that, but it's not actually doing the translation to Markdown properly. And so if you like, or well, Lindsay, are you better understanding the question?
Well, I think, let me see if this answers it, but if you actually change that equation again from your notebook.
Yeah, that should actually work now.
And so save a new version. That is then, you can go back to the article where we created that, and you should be able to get the latest version.
Yeah.
And
so this is the one that I just put in.
Yeah, that's on iooxa, but what if I don't want to be, I just want to be able to pull it, but
like between two notebooks, Don? Or like you've created your library of equations and now you just want to import it into a notebook?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the latter.
Yeah, so I think that's what Rowan just showed. But
that's on Jupyter Lab, right? So I guess, yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
So yeah, if I just copy this and open up a tree view and I say a new Python 3 notebook, so the extension also works over here. So I can go back to here, copy this link over here and import a cell, paste it in. For F6, the paste doesn't work and I haven't fixed that one. But that would then show up right there, basically. And so you don't have to like explicitly go to the iooxa website. Like the content is actually saved there, but you don't ever have to like visit iooxa.com really. You can just sort of zip around between two notebooks, save it in one, open it up in another.
Okay, I see. But it's done through the Chrome extension. Like, yeah, I can't just have a plain Markdown and then pulling that string from my iooxa site to display that equation.
Lindsay, are you following that?
no, I'm not quite sure what you're...
Like basically, I would like to be able to have like a bank of equations and then write like, Markdown or AST or whatever, and just have like, it's basically just a URL, just a link, and then it pulls it down and it plunks it as an HTML like formatted string. So right here, if you do a Markdown, you can't just do like iooxa blah 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 blah, and then it's just gonna plunk in ax equal b, right? You need to add like the Chrome extension to put it up, basically.
Completely without iooxa.
Yeah, it works completely without iooxa. So like other people, once they see the notebook, it's actually stored like in the notebook normally. The only thing that's added is a bit of metadata to link it and say this came from that version. So it's like how your notebooks work all the time.
Yeah, okay, that works. That makes sense, yeah.
Sweet.
One other thing that it might be just worth speaking to is also thinking about outputs. Because we've sort of showed, like, you've showed Markdown, but a lot of writing and sort of Sagi's example of a white paper, like perhaps what you want to be working with is actually like a figure that was created. And then you want to maybe make a fix to that. I don't know if you have an example. If not, that's totally fine. But even just, I think, like talking through what that would look like might be constructive.
Yeah. So this is like a notebook that I've just saved to iooxa.com. So I can, if I wanted to share this with someone, they can go in, copy this link, go to their Jupyter, wherever it is, and then import it from here. So this is sort of what I was showing or trying to show before. And then when you hit the import button, that like just brings in the notebook. So this is like a pretty easy way to share notebooks as well between two different people. And so this output actually is saved on iooxa. We're not able to show that right now. Hopefully by the end of this week, we will be. But then this output specifically can be added into different articles as well. So like pulling this image into a report or a paper or something like that.
So you're in the publishing business then, like technical reports for engineers and all that stuff or papers, right? So like as a license thing for journals to be able to edit, do reviews.
Yeah, I mean,
sounds like a straightforward shot for it, right?
Yeah, that would be the goal, is try and, because I think that, I don't know, publishing everything to PDFs, you lose a lot in that sort of conversion. And if you keep some of those links alive over to notebooks and make it more reproducible, you can also have interactivity potentially in there and all sorts of other stuff. And it gets a little bit more exciting.
Yeah, man. Sounds good. That's how much time have you are you on this already? How much time have you spent on this?
I don't know. It's probably like 6 months, 7 months now.
Oh, that's nothing. That's great.
Yeah. So getting there.
Yeah.
Hopefully, there's JupyterCon coming up in 2 or 3 weeks, which we're hoping to show this extension off to some folks. So yeah, if you did want to use the extension, well, I'll share the link in the meeting notes and on the Slack channel as well. Search for iooxa Jupyter and you'll find it.
Thanks, Ron. Does anyone else have questions or thoughts? Things you want to share?
Well, we have reason to try this out on some of the notebooks that Dom and Sagi and I are sharing. So that might be kind of a nice trial, at least at sort of like low-level basic stuff, to see how well that works.
Whoa, Doug, do you want to learn another tool?
I'm not sure. Having mastered
I thought GitHub and Jupyter Notebook is enough for you, but no problem. John, what do you think? Like, you're actually like in the commercial sector, writing a technical report and providing information to the your clients. Would you? I don't know how would you use it?
Actually, I think it would be pretty interesting because there's a lot of things that are carried over from technical report to technical report. However, figures they seem to change, so I don't know how that would maybe benefit. But certainly like, yeah, just like the basic, like the equations for, yeah, what is a pseudo section? How is it plotted and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I like the idea. I don't know. I was even trying to get people onto LaTeX because then you can at least store some variables and stuff. But it's hard to get people like away from this industry standard Microsoft Word. It's just they say it makes it easier to review other people's stuff. But when you've got stuff like this being made, it seems like to balance it out because like now you can fully edit it and you can see what changes everybody makes. Yeah. I like the new things that come up in the new ways, but I find it hard to convince some of the older dogs. Sorry, Doug, not directed at anybody exactly, but yeah, it's hard to get some change, especially with technical documents like that. It's just everybody wants their PDF or their Word document. But yeah, I think the idea is great though. It would really help in that sense. Just getting people.
Yeah, I think in like talking to some other folks, hearing like their technical reports that are basically like copy pasted for different clients or something, and there's like paragraphs in there that just like carry on typos for years, and like because there's no easy way to actually fix it because you're always working from that root template, and it just like propagates forever. And it's like not worth fixing.
That's exactly what's happened with us. Like every so often someone's like, oh, hey, this doesn't say this company, it's the other company that you copied and pasted it from. And yeah, I don't know, they just don't want to fix that problem. I don't know. But yeah, it happens way too often.
Oh. Super cool. Okay. Then maybe we can take a couple minutes to just go over some of the other items in the notes. Yeah, so I see Joe has dropped some stuff in there. So Joe, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. I spent time this week going over all of the names of properties and operations on the discretized meshes and things, just trying to make them all in line with PEP 8, and as well as kind of clean up some of what, at least my understanding of what they are. So just a few things that I had a few questions on for people in general, as well as kind of coming to a consensus on a few things that we talked about on there. I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to look through it. And one of the things that came up was if we feel better calling things like, so NC would be changed to like either N cells or size cells. I'm not sure with which one people would be better off understanding. I feel both of them are perfectly understandable as far as replacements of them. I feel like either of them are fine.
My initial reaction to that, and this is weird just because we're playing both with geometry and sort of Python conventions at the same time.
Right.
But when you say size, when it says size cells together, I like expect then like what is the size of each of the individual cells?
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too. So I had that feeling too. I just didn't want to bring it up, just to kind of leave it. So that was my original thing when it's like looking, okay, what's the size of cells? It's like, oh, that's this thing.
Yeah.
Another thing that I had a question on is this like VNE and VNF properties. They are a weird thing, and I'm not sure if they're ever used anywhere. I can't find any example of that property being used in SimPEG. It's not really a thing. It doesn't represent the shape of anything that lives on the mesh at all. It's just a tuple of the number of like for edges, it'd be the number of X edges, number of Y edges, and number of Z edges. Those are three different things that each live on the mesh, right?
Oh, that's fair.
Like, I'm not sure what the use is of having a tuple of those three numbers is. Does that kind of make
like when I made that originally, that was, I think I was using it I thought I was using it in some test functions to like verify like matrix dimensions, but maybe it's not in there anywhere, and that I think would be the only place that.
So I'm kind of in favor of just like saying it's going to be removed.
I think
really
the vector number of cells and the vector number of nodes, I think, are still useful though.
Right, and that's why like I suggested naming those to be like shape cells and shape faces y, because it's the shape of, like, it's kind of like a NumPy shape, right? Like it's the shape of the array, it's the shape of things that live on the mesh. And that that kind of made me thinking like, okay, well, what is the point of this VNE? Like you could have a shape faces y because that's something that lives on the mesh. It's the shape of the y face array. So that's why I was kind of curious, like what the use was, just having a tuple of the total number of edges in each dimension was, or faces that are normal to each component.
I do think that, yeah, probably if we're in doubt, rather drop 1 or 2 or 3 things because there are so many things. And that's also what I thought maybe about the NCX, NCY, NCZ, because in the end there are NC0, NC1, NC2.
Yeah.
Or just keep the short names, but they point to shape cells 0, shape cells 1.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, yeah, but there are so many methods. So because it happened to me, I think I asked Rowan more than once, what's that property? Because there's just so many, and if you look for one, it's hard to find the right one because it's full of possibilities.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of like just relying on them, like as far as like shape cells, because then it's not really, because like there's a little bit of discussion on the cylinder mesh, the cylindrical mesh, or at least I brought up like, okay, does it really make sense to call these the X faces on a cylinder mesh? Like, or it's like, I don't know. You know what I mean? Like it's, okay, you kind of have to know that X means radial on a cylinder mesh. You have to know that these things mean that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of going along that way. So it's kind of one of the thoughts and discussion we were talking, or I brought up there. Another thing was, so we have an NCX, NCY, NCZ property, right? Which we understand that those are the number of cells in the X direction. But then we also have an like NFX, like number of faces, number of X faces, right? That those are 2 different like types of things. But looking at how they're named, it would lead me to believe, coming in from the outside, that they would be similar things, but they're not, right? Like one quantity represents the number of cells in the X direction. The other quantity represents the number of X faces. Right, so it's like you could kind of, okay, you could say like, okay, well, it would be NXFX, right? The number of in the X direction of face X's. That was just kind of an odd thought I had when I was looking at NCX. I was like, well, that's not really quite the same thing as an FX. So kind of led me to move the X in, to attach it to the N instead of to cells. That was my thought there, if you're looking through the thing. And then the other part that I wanted to talk about was,
I guess one question there is, are like NCX, NCY, NCZ, is that used quite a bit? Because we could actually just like get rid of those and then just deal with shape cells at 0, 1, 2.
I would be fine with that, and then just mark them as deprecated.
I use them a lot, but I would be absolutely fine to access the shape and the index of it.
I would be fine with that, and then we don't have to worry about renaming them. Just point them to there and point to user like this. These will be deprecated and removed. Just use this.
Yeah.
Okay. I had a little bit of a thing about naming things grid CC, grid N. My thought was, okay, the only time when they're grids is when they're on like the tensor mesh or tensor type meshes, or right? They're not grids on a tree mesh. They're not grids, and if we had like in a triangulated mesh. So it's like, okay, well, should they just, I mean, they're not even grids really. They're just locations. They're the XYZ values of all of these things, the locations of all these things. That's what it's like, okay, does grid really make sense as a name when they're not grids? Like, or they're not necessarily grids. So that's why I was like, okay, well, either that's what led me to calling them locations, or Lindsay had brought up just dropping grid or location, just calling them cell centers, nodes, edges X, edges, faces Y. And I kind of like that too.
Us having like extensive conversations about something really similar last year.
Yeah. Well, I'm taking steps to get it done. So I'm not like, I kind of like not having that there and just calling it cell centers. And I don't know what other people think. And look, having a common thing in front of them makes it a little bit easier for tab completion to see that, okay, I can get the locations of all of these things, or yeah.
Yeah, this came up with, I think I designed something that would return the cell width for the tree meshes. And then we went through a whole host of names and we ended up calling it like gridded H or something.
I think it's like H gridded right now.
Yeah, which, I mean, just come to consensus on something and then stick with it. But yeah, like cell thicknesses or whatever.
Cell widths.
Yeah, but then it's, I think, can you make non-cubic tree meshes? I think you could do that, can't you?
Not right now.
Not yet.
I mean, they don't have to be cubic, but they can be, each dimension can be different.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they don't have to be cubes. They can be, they're general rectangular prisms.
Yeah, so then you can't really do thickness or width because that would be one dimension out of the, well,
cell sizes.
yeah.
Sagi, it looks like you had a comment.
Nothing. I don't know. I think I'm probably a little bit more conservative about. I don't want to change this. I don't know. I'm fine with grid because grid is not necessarily meaning like a uniform or like structured grid, and unstructured grid could have like random points. So I don't know. I'm probably just used to it, and I'm reluctant to change usually, unless like you have very clear reason why we need to change. And at this point, I don't know. I think I'm kind of fine with grid CC, grid FX, and seems making sense to me.
Okay. Like I said, I just wanted to come to a consensus on something pretty quickly. Those are the only kind of things that I think were everything else is pretty straightforward on there.
So do you have sort of a timeline in mind? Like, do we want to maybe leave this document open till the end of the week and let folks kind of jump in? Or do you want to sort of, I mean, I think there's some things that it seems like we have pretty solid consensus on. Yeah, how would you like to proceed, Joe?
I would just kind of like to, I can leave it open for like at least another week. Just people, just look through it and put your opinions on there. Yeah. Those are the kind of the small areas that are the few things that I was kind of just wanted everyone's help on.
So was that on GitHub there, Joe? I think I missed that.
There's a link in Slack and a link on the meeting notes from last week. I can put it up again.
Okay, I'll get it there. I'll take a look.
Excellent. Well, thanks for organizing all of this, Joe. This is a lot to go through and think through, and yeah, a lot of conventions that we created a long time ago. It's cool to revisit and yeah, do some cleanup.
Do we have any idea of, on GitHub it doesn't say too much, but I mean, just because it doesn't say it there, it's not given, it's not used. Do we know how many projects depend on discretize?
No.
I think because SimPEG, the massive changes in SimPEG are usually for scripts that run SimPEG, not as a small thing in a bigger thing. But discretize is not quite NumPy, but it's more.
And my thought, like we will keep a lot of these shorthand things as well, like NC, NF, things like that, just for shorthand quick stuff. And everything will be deprecated properly and linked and point towards new things, so it won't break anything for a long time. It'll just issue the future warnings.
Yeah.
Say so many of the examples, tutorials, all of these things, I'm guessing maybe a large portion of the tests, or at least a certain portion of the tests that we have, are all going to use the sort of original way of calling this stuff. So, I mean, once we've come to consensus, that seems like a fairly easy, albeit boring task that maybe I could throw some hours at.
It's just, yeah, it'll be like everything will work. We'll just point to the new things eventually and say, hey, we might remove these at some point. Just be aware.
But I guess just to be sure, I think as you run some of it, like you're going to get outputs that are just like, will be deprecated in the future. And it would be nice to not have it. I mean, if it's one or two, it's sort of okay, but if it's happening,
could have maybe 2 versions without actual printing the warning, but we know it, and then 2 other releases with actually forcing the prints or something like that.
So we could start it as a deprecation warning and then move it to a future warning.
Yeah.
Because deprecation warnings are usually hidden, but future warnings are exposed to end users.
Okay.
Deprecation warnings are meant for like developers, so like you would run something with deprecation warnings on, and then future warnings are meant for like end users to warn them.
2 sort of thoughts that came up with this is, first, it might be worth actually, when we start doing some of these changes, just like drop the release notes in the Pi Vista Slack, because that's actually probably one of the places where it's there's a fair bit of tight connection, and we might just want to give them a heads up. And also with the subsurface project in Swung.
Like the major motivating thing here is just to make everything in line with Pepe style. Clean it up.
Yeah. And then I guess the other thought, and this is a bit more general, but both with SimPEG and with Discretize, is it would be great, and I don't know how to do this, but I know it can be done. On our docs right now, we only ever have the latest version. And so it would actually be nice if we could be able to go back to previous versions. And right now they're deployed, Discretize is on GitHub pages. The SimPEG docs are still on Google. And so we can try and migrate that at some point. But if anyone wants to look into that, that would be, I think, a good thing.
I guess my other question is, did anybody get a chance to try out and see if they could reproduce that error on GitHub or on Travis that SimPEG was failing?
The seg fault?
Yeah, the seg fault.
I tried it, but it didn't fail.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Soggy, did you get a chance to try and see if that SimPEG seg faulted and that error for you?
You're muted, Soggy.
No, I haven't. Just I'll do it this week. Sorry about that, Joe.
That was it. Okay. So just drop stuff in that document. I'll put another link.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe.
Okay. And then eventually I'll capture most of this discussion and move it to GitHub so it's documented on there. I just didn't necessarily want to put a link to a working document on GitHub right now.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. And about the versions, Lindsay, I think Leo has that set up and documented, right? So it would be a matter of copying
Leo.
His things.
That's usually a good idea for community practices, is look at what Leo's doing. Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Dieter.
Yeah, some of the manuals are like that, right? Because in the GIF manuals and read the docs, you can go back to
read the docs,
version.
it's automatic, yes, if you have it on read the docs. But that's a read the docs platform thing.
I see. Right. Got it. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I see Devin's dropped a couple notes in there too.
Yeah. So started to work through the rest of the tests for the SimPEG EM1D. So I've got kind of everything there except for the stuff involving the dual moment. And to make sure I understand, is this sort of the idea that you're using different sources for different ranges of time channels? Like you'll have one source that is going to be corresponding to early time channels, and then one source, maybe it's a different waveform or it's like a different dipole moment for the late time. Is that correct, Soggy?
Yeah. So what it does, like you just first evaluate the step function and then convolve two different waveforms. That's it. So that's what
Okay,
it does.
so it is actually the same. Yes. What I'm getting at is the dipole moment of the source isn't changing. It's the waveform that's different.
Well, in reality,
Or
it
you
changes.
can.
In reality, it changes, but you always normalize the data. So on the code hand, you don't have to worry about the dipole moments and stuff. So it's like physically the same coil. So it is the same source.
Yeah, so the area doesn't actually change. That's kind of the important thing.
Right.
Okay. No, this I might be able to work with that. So that's one thing that needs to get fixed, and you said it's really just relevant to SkyTem. And then there is a way to invert for the flight height.
Yes.
And as I've coded it up right now, I've actually put the source and the receiver as explicit locations, whereas this inversion for the flight height, or treating that as a model parameter, makes more sense to kind of define the source and then define the receiver as an offset from the source. So I'm just kind of trying to come up with a way to bridge the gap between those two things so that the way we define the flight height is something that makes sense, but also allows us to just put in the physical locations for source and receiver. So those are kind of the two remaining things. And after that, it's just a matter of kind of finalizing stuff to have it be the most similar to the current SimPEG framework as possible. Everything's more or less done. Just there's some things about how we define waveforms and implement them that we want to get to be as close to SimPEG as possible. But at this point, it's really coming together, and I'd say 95% of the tests work, and we have a whole suite of examples that will let you do forward modeling and inversion for a single sounding, and the stitched 1D forward modeling and inversion, both frequency and time domain. So the core set of tutorial examples, and basically all the tests are working now.
Great.
So it's close. It's close. So I want to maybe spend some more time on it for the rest of the week, and then make a pull request, and then get some input from you guys, and then we might be able to bring it into SimPEG pretty quickly.
Sounds great. Yeah, I'm sorry. I was hoping to spend a bit more time on that.
It's all right. Just give me a review and do the final finishing touches, and that would be great. And then I guess after that, it would be sort of to put some time towards the MT stuff. I'm pretty interested in trying to reproduce some of the UBC GIF results with the SimPEG code.
One quick thought on the offset is in the inverting for source receiver height. I think you should be able to do that through a mapping. So define height as a parameter, and then basically say the receiver location is then some like height plus or minus whatever.
That's exactly how it's set. How was it?
Yeah. There is a mapping for H. That kind of framework already exists. I just don't want a situation where for some applications, the Z position is the actual elevation, and then for this particular situation, it's defined as being an offset. I just need to think about it. I do know where it's happening, but yeah, I want to make it not. I don't want to make it confusing for the end user. That's kind of who I'm thinking about when I'm making these decisions.
That's great because that's actually very confusing in the user end. Like, oh, what do you mean
Yeah.
offset? You got a receiver location and you also got an offset. What the hell? Yes, I'll take a look and think about what I could do. Yeah, it's absolutely confusing.
Cool. Thanks,
Actually, one thing we could do is we could, this is actually what we could do. When you define the receiver, we can put in a flag where you would say like absolute or offset. And you could actually just choose whether or not you want to define your receivers relative to the source, or if you want to define your receivers as the absolute position.
Yeah, something like that. Sorry, I need to actually head out. So Dev, if you have any question or help, just bug me.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye all.
See ya.
Thanks, Rowan.
Cool. John, it looks like you've also got some updates to share.
Yeah, just a quick one there. Yeah, Dom's got me my head a little wrapped around the tiled simulation problem there, so I've started that up. Yeah, I pushed it to my MT branch, but I'll make another separate one so that it's, because I'm a little bit behind and it'll just be easier to pull that in. So I've just put it all onto the Dask side. So I set it up like how you did for simulation there, Joe. So it shouldn't have to affect anything on the main SimPEG structures. So yeah, I've added like a data misfit and the objective function so that we can bring in our Dask stuff. So yeah, just started on that, and yeah, hopefully here I'll be able to test it. I just have to, yeah, I'll probably have to bounce some stuff off you there, Dom. Just trying to wrap my head around now. Yeah, just cell sizes and all that kind of stuff, like how amount of cells per different source. How do you deal with that kind of thing?
Yeah, just start the branch, and then I'll adapt the tile example.
Okay.
To be able to use the tile parallelization, and then you know it's going to be pretty straightforward. You'll have an example to work for the EM after.
Cool. All right. Well then, yeah, that should be coming up pretty soon. And then a note that something that interesting I found when I was just working with the parallelizations of just with multi-thread or multi-processing and Dask. Yeah, so I was just running an example, and I found that my cores utilization was showing like 100% right off the bat using just like a simple multi-processing problem. And then all of a sudden it just kind of went down to like 1%, and it just continued. My code was running, everything was showing that it was running, but it started off for full power and then it just died out. So then I looked into it a little bit more, and apparently the problem is the BLAST library that's NumPy, SciPy, and pretty much everything is built with, or BLAST or OpenBLAST. I think it was both actually that had the effect. They reorder your resources as soon as on import. So I found a little, I'll have to post the link, but there's a command line that you can use to the OS system, and I think it only works on maybe Linux and Mac. And you can tell it to go back to a single threaded and not use multi-threaded BLAST. And then all of a sudden you stay at 100% core usage all the time.
But how would this be if you force the Intel math vector library instead of the OpenBLAST?
That I haven't tried yet. So yeah, I was going to test it against using the MKL or the Intel stuff.
Usually it depends, but you use a lot of linalg, in SimPEG. So I assume it would be quite a bit faster if you use MKL, but I don't know. Okay,
well, it's not necessarily this. Well, I guess yeah, it's the speed. It's just like all of a sudden it is using everything, but then it just dies out. I was super curious on that. It's like, why does that happen? So I don't know if people see that. Yeah, BLAST is, I guess, it's multi-threaded and does say that, but it's that must be the root of all these problems. I'd say with Paradiso and without that being thread safe. Yeah, I don't know. Just an observation that I had so far. I'm kind of digging a little bit more into it. But I did notice that if you do put BLAST to multi-threaded or to not use multi-thread, it's much slower. It's about, yeah, significantly slower if you try to limit BLAST. But yeah, that's about it.
Interesting. Cool. Thanks, John. So I have a quick update, is that next week I'm giving a talk. Julio reached out from the Swung group. So this is targeted at an audience in Mexico. And he asked if I would talk a bit about sort of open source software development. It's a geoscience and geophysics audience. So talk a bit about SimPEG and some of the work we're doing, and also kind of open source practices and open source communities. So I'm gonna be putting together about a half-hour talk, and I'm gonna sort of think through a few examples. And so I might reach out and just put out a call for maybe a handful of examples. I was kind of thinking of focusing in on some of the groundwater project in Myanmar, and kind of show, like, maybe show an example from research, and then also show and perhaps dig into a few more details with the Myanmar project, because we've got a really nice set of notebooks and lots of blog posts and things like that that we can point folks to. So that's kind of what I was thinking initially. Yeah, so if anyone has initial reactions to that, I'm all ears, but otherwise I will send some things around for input and feedback. Cool. Okay, does anyone else have things you want to bring up before we wrap up today? No? Well, everyone needs to send Thibaut good vibes for tomorrow. And yeah, we'll see him as once he's through, so that'll be good. Perfect.
Does anyone have the URL for that? Or do we have to request it?
No, there's a limited number of people that can attend. So it's not like so it's virtual, but
yeah,
attendance is like 10 people. And yeah, so each one has been, it has to go through grad studies. And I think Thibaut's pretty much got his full complement. Anyway, we haven't figured out how to celebrate yet, but that's on Thibaut's hands. So hopefully there'll be something tomorrow or shortly after that. And we haven't figured out whether it could be virtual with people in Calgary and California, or whether they're actually going to try to have something in the park. But Thibaut's going to do well. And yeah, if people want to give him a shout beforehand, that'd be great.
Sounds good. Cool. All right, well, thanks everyone. We'll see you next week.
Yeah, I guess, Doug, I might talk to you for 5 minutes if you're not busy.
Sure.
Yeah, mostly just going through.
Let me stop